Welcome to Life List, a birding podcast.
Hello. Welcome, everybody. This is Life List, a birding podcast. I am George Armistead, and we have a full house today. Molly Brown and Alvaro Jaramillo. How are you guys doing?
Hello.
Hey, happy to be back recording.
Yes, feels good to be back in the saddle. I feel like it's been a couple weeks, at least for me.
Yeah, weird schedules.
Yeah. I never watched
figure.
Full House, by the way, so I don't know.
Oh, really? Al, you're missing out. I'm sure Molly never watched, so that probably leaves just me.
You had a lot of time on your
hands.
hands.
Tell us about
it. Well, I think we will not do that right now. Instead, I think what we should do is introduce our guest, who is well known probably to just about everybody listening because he also hosts another podcast with his buddy Charlie Hesse, which is called Naturally Adventurous. This guest is a global ecologist, an author, a guide, a tremendous wildlife photographer as well. Somebody that we all have known about for a long time, but really only got to meet for the first time recently. Ken Behrens, welcome to Life List. It's really great to have you here.
Yeah. Hi, folks. Great to be here. And yeah, so good to finally meet you guys there a few weeks back in Alaska. That was quite surreal. I really felt like I had Alvaro and George as neighbors there for like the better part of 2 weeks. Yeah. Oh, hey, neighbor.
Yeah.
It's true.
We got to even do a little like 20 minutes of sea watching while everybody was having breakfast. That was pretty cool.
I love that. Yeah, yellow-billed loons going by and surfbird. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still a little salty about that. I was still, I had my face buried in some greasy spoon breakfast there at the Polar Cafe, and you guys are out spotting birds. It wasn't fair at all.
I'm doing this thing now. I'm sort of avoiding breakfast, on tours because I eat too much. So I'm like, well, I'm sitting here just drinking coffee, and I thought I'll go out there and look for some birds, and there you were.
It's true.
It sounds like you all went to summer camp together or something.
Alaska camp.
Alaska camp.
Yeah, I was thinking between that Polar Cafe and the subway just down the street, if you could amass a pretty good list of birds from the windows of those two places.
Yeah, I was confused too that the Polar Cafe, if you looked at the sign outside, it said the Polar Cub Cafe.
Exactly.
Didn't it? And I'm like, so what's the name? Is it changed name, under new ownership or something? Or is it always been the Polar Cub and we always called it the Polar? I don't know.
The son took it over. The cub took over from the, I don't know.
Yeah. The cub took over, right? It's a family business. So.
I was also confused because, so normally on that tour, what Tropical Birding has done is we just go to the grocery store and people get a whole bunch of food and just eat in the room and then we meet and go. But then that place was open now. I don't know if it hasn't been historically. And people told me, the Polar Cafe. And then I drive in and I see Polar Cub Cafe. And I'm, it's such a dodgy little place. Like it really looks like some den of ill repute. There's like this little door. It doesn't look open. I'm thinking, is this even the right place? And, I tell the clients, just hang out here. And I go in the door and sure enough, there's a whole cafe with George and Alvaro inside. It's like, what could be more reputable?
Yeah, and outside there was a guy. If when we went in, there was this drunk guy, and it was like 7 a.m. or whatever it was, and he was just talking about this and that, the birds and whatever.
Yeah.
And he was opening the door for us, and how you guys doing? But he was kind of on a different planet at that point.
Yeah.
And then he started talking to one of the participants later about the government and what they were doing, and they were putting stuff in the clouds. And by that point, I'm like, okay, I'm glad he's talking over there, not over here where the scopes are, because it was getting a little wackadoodle.
Classic Alaska character sounds like there. Yeah.
What a place, Nome.
Yeah, really is. No place like Nome, as
truly.
They like to say.
Truly.
Yeah. Now I have this summer camp vision in my head with all these different tour groups there, did anybody like play any pranks on anybody or anything like
God.
that?
That's
Because that should be happening.
You're right.
I
And I'm
know.
glad it's not. It'd be such a slippery slope.
Oh,
I'll
Good
just
Lord.
would.
plant seeds now.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
It could be
You know,
dangerous.
I think, you know, I think that would happen if we weren't all trying to at the same time be responsible and professional, because you just know, somebody's like, oh, I'm going to take the air out of their tires or something, this is going to be so funny. But it's not so funny when you have 14 other people who are not part of the
Yeah, that's right. And we all are kind of sympathetic, I think, to the responsibilities of being a guide. So we certainly wouldn't want to throw in a wrench in anybody else's work there, as tempting as it would be. You would have to be in the right zone of like, it doesn't really disturb tour.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
would it be? Like even just come, if you just said, on the radios or something, oh, we've got, I don't know quite what it is, but it looks like a stint, but the bill looks like wide or something, like a spoon, then
I think it's
people
got a
would be like,
deformity or
oh my
something.
God. Right. That's so even that would be, see, you almost can't joke in birds. It's very serious business.
Disturbing.
Wally.
Yeah.
Like, super serious. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's like I remember. Have you ever seen that T-shirt? It's like it's supposed to be for like it's like an old pirate captain quote that says, "The beatings shall continue until morale improves."
Yeah,
I sort of feel like that's what an Alaska tour is in many ways. It's like your long days.
It's one of a kind tour. I have never guided any other tour that I even find comparable. I've guided in Iceland, which is probably the closest thing because you do have those super long / never ending days. But Alaska it's bizarro. It's a very good kind of bizarro, but it is a unique tour.
Yeah, it really is. Long days.
Yeah. And, the other thing too is like in most places in the world, they can be, developing nations or what have you. And there's all these different cultural things, but you often can go and stay at some amazingly charming, wonderful lodge run by the family that's like just beautiful and then it's like Alaska has none of that. You know what I mean? That it's all sort of, and I don't want to disparage it, but it's just the way it is. There are people who go up to hotels in Nome that are birders for a few weeks, and the rest of the time, there's gold prospectors and people working for the government and this and that, whatever. And everything's kind of like weirdly functional or a little weird or funky. And, you sometimes you're just like, this is like a alternate world part of the US, and that's also what makes it cool, and so it's not a negative necessarily. It's like it's different in such a weird way.
Yeah.
I would actually say that the accommodation in Alaska has a little bit more uniqueness and charm than your average US accommodation. It's one of the things when I started guiding in the States, I had been guiding out of the States for almost 15 years and I hadn't like barely guided a US trip. The first one I did was that Colorado, chicken run. And it was just like shocking just staying in like Super 8s compared to, as you say, Alvaro, like some little lodge in the cloud forest run by a family where they're squeezing you fresh juice in the morning. And it's a different world when you're eating like American continental breakfast at the Super 8.
Well, Ken, where are you now? Tell us where you're at now, what you've been up to, what you've been seeing the last week, 2 weeks since you got back from Alaska.
Yeah, I'm in Pittsburgh at the moment, which is where I've been living since I moved to the States about a year and a half ago. My family and I just did a road trip up to upstate New York, Adirondacks, and Vermont. So we're just back from that, and that was great. You'll be hearing about this on Naturally Adventurous, no doubt. But I saw my last sort of lower 48 breeding bird that, I guess, aside from West Coast stuff, which was the Bignell's thrush, which is like everyone's last Eastern lower 48 breeding bird. That was great. That was a really cool little microhabitat that bird is in up on top of the mountains up there. And yeah, now it's just Pittsburgh, it's the dog days of summer. It's this funny time of year where occasionally, like, a rose-breasted grosbeak will just randomly sing once, and then it won't sing again the rest of the day. So you've gone from this like frenzy of singing and breeding in like late May and early June to this funny time of the year. I kind of enjoy it. Kind of something cool about it. The insects are louder than the birds.
Yeah, I'm going to have to disagree with you there, Ken.
It's not your favorite time of year?
Oh my God. Yeah. Like I am enjoying the garden. As our listeners will know, I'm loving the native gardening and the plants, and it was fun to come home and see a whole bunch of stuff in bloom that hadn't been when I left, and it's just kind of constantly changing and morphing and growing, and that is wonderful. And the insects are fun, but the heat and the humidity, goodness, man, it is. It just is. It like I in order to like venture outside, I kind of have to do it really early or really late, because middle of the day I just feel like I'm walking through soup out there.
Yeah, Philly's probably even more so than Pittsburgh, the eastern side of the state or the southeast corner.
Yeah, humidity. We're right on the edge of the coastal plain here, so I think it does make a bit of a difference. But yeah, Molly, what have you been up to lately? You've been out in the field of late?
I've been out in my field as of late. That's about
Nice.
it. Yeah, kind of continuing my summer at home. So I'm logging a lot of hours outside, but from a bird standpoint, that's arguably not too exciting, except they're just, birding my patch every day, seeing a lot of this like post-breeding dispersal starting to come through, and just different things that are around that aren't normally right here in the spot. So that's been pretty fun to watch. Families of birds moving through. Something like, I don't know, a big flock of barn swallows coming over in the evening feels pretty exciting. But my most exciting birds have been moths lately, because I've been putting the light on every night, I'd say. Having fun with that. But,
Oh, that sounds awesome.
Yeah. Talking about the heat, something that I was just thinking about, I've just been jumping all over the place in the world looking at tours and such lately. And a lot of times these tours are in really hot places, and it's not really mentioned in the itineraries. And I was thinking about tours that I've done. We just launched my Panama tour. I'm going back to Panama. It's really hot there in coastal Panama in the summer. And I remember thinking that. And I think about how hot it is here, but I don't know, it doesn't stop me from going out. And then when I look back on it and have the memories, I don't think about how hot it was as something negative. But then I thought, yeah, I guess it is pretty unbearable. It's just one of those things,
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think you adapt I lived in a super hot place for more than 10 years, and AC definitely makes you, like, you go outside and you're like, oh, it's horrible. If you don't have AC, it's kind of adapt.
I haven't gone that far. I'm still adapting without AC, but yeah.
I had a client who lived in Florida his whole life, and his whole family had, so he was like multiple generations in Florida, and he basically said that Florida was essentially unlivable, and people did not move to the South, until like kind of post World War II, and the AC became a thing. Like, it was impossible to live in Florida and be kind of like comfortable at all. And that's why Florida now is so huge in terms of population. It's essentially AC. That's what did it. And I'm like, wow, this is such a weird concept, An entirely chunk of the world suddenly becomes livable that was not for hundreds of years.
And you guys don't even have AC, right, Al? You like your place?
No, nothing.
And Al, we've seen you twice now while we've been chatting here with your lens pointing to the outside.
The outside.
Yeah. What are you focusing on there?
There's a couple of juvenile sparrows. We have white crowned sparrows nest here. That's not that unusual, but it was a really fresh juvenile white crowned sparrow, and they're all streaky and weird looking. Something that most people would not think of as a white crowned sparrow. And then there's a song sparrow, and they're actually in the area, but actually I don't have them near my house. So it's like a bird that's probably moved a few miles to be here. And it just looks so weird. And, the breast streaking is so broad and odd and fluffy. And I just thought, oh, you only have like a couple of weeks where these birds are out, get some photos of them, because they always confuse people. And they often have yellowish tones, especially here on the, if I go to the end of my street, I have breeding Savannah sparrows, and the juveniles are like lemon yellow sometimes. Amazing things, the entire head. And if I show some of these photos to people, I have no idea what that is. It's like, so it sort of interests me from just a birding perspective. It's like a time of year that, for me, that kind of stuff's exciting. Actually, this is a fun time for me, time of year. The pelicans and everything are moving north. There's like Heermann's gulls showing up all over the place on the beaches. Humpback whales start being closer to shore. Pelagic season is ramping up. Shorebirds are arriving. It's no warmer here than it ever is. So it's actually kind of I like this time of year a lot. I just start seeing, and random things show up, like out of the blue, you'll have some weirdo bird, out of habitat or place, or, just more ocean going birds showing up in places that you don't expect them. It's like the start of the entire sort of fall season happens early.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I am looking forward to doing some shorebirding. I think later this week. That the shorebird migration is in full swing here. And actually, we're actually going to have a cold front go through overnight, it sounds like. So there could even be like the first songbirds starting to push here in, mid-late July. So yeah, as you say, fall migration is underway. So interesting time. Just wish it was cooler. That's all.
Yeah.
But yeah. So Ken, you were living in Madagascar until a year ago, right? And you have written one book at least already on birding in Madagascar. You have written books on sea watching and on habitats. Tell us about the books you've done, and if you have any projects upcoming that folks should know about.
The first major book I did was this sea watching book that covers eastern water birds in flight. And I mean, that was a huge effort. I realized when I finished that book, I'd been working on that book for a quarter of my life to that point, which was pretty insane. Since then, I've done a few other things. I've done some site guides, and I did a guide to the wildlife of Madagascar photographic book. And then, I got into this habitat thing with a couple of my friends and colleagues, including Charlie, my co-host, the Naturally Adventurous. And so at the moment, I am doing a sort of a follow-up. We're doing a follow-up series of books. We did a global book, The Wildlife Habitats of the World, that tries in one volume to actually meaningfully cover all the world's terrestrial habitats. But we're doing follow-up volumes specific to each continent. So I was the lead author on the Africa book. And you know how these things go. Like when the prospect comes up of doing these follow-up books, you convince yourself that it's going to be easy. And most of the work is already done because you already did the global book. And that is just completely wrong. Like doing this book ended up probably being more work than the entire global book.
Oh, wow.
The good thing is I think it's sweet, and it has a lot of novel material, and a lot of things are improved and corrected, but it was a massive amount of work. So I've actually been in the proof stage of that this week, which is where the publisher has done the layout. They put all your photos and caption and graphics and text together, and then you're going through line by line, painstakingly trying to find the last few errors that have snuck in. And then the other last thing I'm working on, which is also nearing its conclusion, is a photographic guide to Malagasy birds. The one I did earlier was wildlife, which covered all kinds of stuff. lemurs and chirps and even butterflies, and even if I threw in a few plants. But this is just birds, more of a traditional but photographic bird guide.
That sounds awesome. I loved your sea watching book. I remember that book you did with Cameron Cox as somebody who's done quite a bit of sea watching, enjoys seabirding. That I remember well when that book came out, and I thought it was pretty darn cool. Still do. And the Habitats book is fantastic as well. I've got a copy of the Habitats of the World. I shared it with my father when it came out, as he is a serious nature book aficionado and a librarian. And he couldn't believe he hadn't heard about it yet when I showed it to him. He was like, "This is incredible, this book." And I was like, "I know. These guys know what they're doing." You know?
Nice to hear.
Yeah. I got a question or a comment or a thought. So I was in the Galapagos just recently, and one of the participants, Dave, he said, on eBird, if you're in Galapagos, it rolls up to a greater region. It rolls up not to South America, but it rolls up to like the Pacific Ocean or Ocean Islands or something like that. And I thought, well, this has got to be an error, right? Galapagos is part of South America. Then turns out that eBird's is just doing that because the ABA regions happen to be those regions. So the ABA outside of North America also has regions for listing, right? These are just listing regions. They're not bioregions or whatever, they're just listing regions. But South America does not include the Galapagos. It doesn't include Malpelo Island, which is, right off of Colombia. And it doesn't include the Falklands, Malvinas, among other things. And I thought this was crazy. Seriously, I've kind of started talking to the ABA people. But you, as somebody who's like a bird person who rolls around all over the world, and you realize that these regions are kind of fluid. Is Tobago really South America, or is it Caribbean? But isn't that a little odd? Like, don't we automatically think of those places as South America, or am I wrong on that kind of from your world perspective? Even habitats wise, like the Falklands almost are like Tierra del Fuego more than anything else. But anyway, what's your thought, all of you, on that?
Yeah, well, I hadn't even realized that the ABA has like global listing regions. And so when we chatted prior to recording, I pulled this up and I'm looking at this map, and it is a little bit weird. The Falklands is really weird to me. And that is just like unequivocally South American to me. Galapagos, right. I don't know if there's a case for that. It's kind of interesting. There's an Indian Ocean, or it just says Indian listing region. And then Madagascar and all those archipelagos in the Western Indian Ocean are in that. I don't know. It kind of makes me wonder, like, who came up with these regions and based on what. I don't know that I would necessarily do better, but
my guess is that they've been the same regions since like the formation of the ABA.
This map looks pretty old. I mean,
it sure does.
Therefore, like before people were even traveling that much.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, in today's world, this just makes almost no sense. Like, I don't know, but I was wondering, I've just kind of been trying to get takes from others. Does this make no sense to others? Like almost like we should revamp these regions if anybody's using them. And even to line up with AOS, regions a little bit more cleanly.
Well, it does. It does start to matter to some folks. I think particularly for the oceanic regions, right? Especially if you're doing cruises, or like you say, if you really spend time building your lists in Bermuda or the Galapagos, or if you're doing a transoceanic cruise from Cape Horn to St. Helena or what have you. There are people that do care about those lists because they realize they've spent some time there. So, I mean, in some sense, to me, it seems like ultimately you have to draw the line someplace, right? Like these are as you say, in reality, they are it's a fluid thing where it's not like there are actual boundaries. So we're drawing listing boundaries. Does it make more sense that they, I don't know what makes the most sense, I guess. Like,
Well,
I see, looking at where Galapagos is, it is a good ways out. Is it, does it make more sense as part of the Pacific region? I certainly think of it as part of South America. I agree.
right.
And I would say that Bermuda also I think of as more part of North America than Atlantic Ocean. But are you going to bend that thing way around to include Bermuda? Or would you make it a little exclave that's part of North America? Probably not. So I think it's hard to know how to draw the lines. But I think you're right also that with travel being what it is today, that they may not make sense as they exist now.
Well, the only way you kind of get in and out of Galapagos for nearly everybody is to fly back to Ecuador, which
right.
politically
Almost
it's a
always
part
Guayaquil.
of. So it seems to me that, it's not the kind of place where people are on a cruise ship kind of going by the Galapagos and ticking off birds in the same way that like Tristan da Cunha, is it just sort of, it's odd to me. And every one of those birds, essentially, it's not are of New World origin. You don't really have like Hawaii, this sort of way more gray. Hawaii was a big issue for the ABA because it is kind of a gray area, and it yet politically it's part of the U.S. So what do you do? But I think Galapagos seems like, I was just floored because for me Galapagos has always been 155% South America, and that it's not considered part of South America in a listing region was like, wow. I don't know. I'm just putting that out there for everybody to comment on.
Stirring the pot as usual.
Yeah, and the
Always
really
stirring.
angry comments can go to Naturally Adventurous. Actually, I would just prefer if all the real listing, people who have like devoted decades to building up their Pacific Ocean list. Please go over there. And to Charlie, he could handle those questions.
Charlie is he's a British gentleman and very very diplomatic. Yeah, he'll be happy to hear your concerns.
I will say he does a decent Borat imitation as well. I was just listening today. It's pretty good.
I think he's all around good with languages, whether speaking different languages or different accents.
Sounds like it. I was impressed to hear that he learned Cyrillic. He was learning Cyrillic from his trips to the stands.
Yeah.
Yeah, he throws it out. He learns while he's on his trips.
Wow.
Hard to fathom.
Help. Well, we don't want to dwell on this too much, but I've been staring at this map now while I was listening to you guys. I'm also struck by
I tell you can't get away from this. Yeah.
No, you can't unsee it. So there's an absolutely massive thing, which is Eurasia. And I've never heard of anyone having a Eurasian list. What people do is essentially, Western Palearctic is the big list, which includes parts of Africa and the Middle East. So I don't know, like how many people are actually using these? And then you look at North America. Well, how many people have a North American list? I mean, people have ABA area list, and you referenced Hawaii, which is now included in the ABA.
Yeah.
But on this map, that would be excluded. That would be Pacific. So I don't know. Probably somebody like drew it in the 80s, and then it's been like this ever since.
Yeah, I think that's what's going on.
There is Listing Central at the ABA where we could actually look up and see who the leaders are in these areas.
Right.
I suspect you're right, in particular when it comes to Eurasia. I've never heard of that. Certainly people, worry about their Asia list or their Western Palearctic list, but never. And there was, for a while, I remember, like an AOU area list that was basically Panama North.
That's still there. It's called AOS North, I think.
Okay, and
How
that
is different than North America.
Well, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I think that's basically the same thing, and and that was maybe saying competitive is overstating it, but I think there were people that mattered. That list mattered too. I don't know if that's still the case.
It's crazy.
Ken,
cannot
would
see
you
it.
describe yourself as a lister?
No, certainly not historically. I have to admit that I have been kind of dragged down the eBird rabbit hole, as so many others have. And I've kind of gotten into this global year listing thing just because I travel so much and I do rack up a year list. And yeah, so I've got some little side projects. I don't really care about like my global life total or my ABA life total or even my North American life total or my Indian life total from this map of listing regions now.
Yeah. I'm going to start compiling my Gondwana list total.
Reunite.
Reunite.
I kind of like that idea, actually.
We should come up with like alternative creative. Yeah, just everything is like some funky, like the world's 5 largest islands. That should be a listing area.
Right. Right.
Pangea list.
Right. What's your communist country list? Actually, this would be fun. Actually, it implies a whole different type of travel. Some of them, sort of, right. Or countries that have changed their name in the last 15 to 20 years or something. What's that list? I think Ken and Charlie would beat all of us in those. But
yeah, I suspect.
Yeah. Got to find a more creative way to have an edge there.
I know. Yeah. I know. One totally okay. Off the topic thing, but thinking of camp in Alaska, as I was talking to Doug Gottschfeld, and he didn't use Barrow, or he called it Berotkiatvik. He put them all together, which the two names, and he said that people actually use this. I think. I mean, I looked it up. Some people use this as I guess it's a joke, but he said I gotta try to do it with the proper back of the throat. Berotkiatvik, right?
So this is actually in use. This is a.
I looked. I saw
sounds
that
like a Dougism to me.
Others had used it in the past, but I mean, I think it's Doug's. But I don't know whether others have used it because of Doug. But I kind of went, I think it's good because you sort of include both names in one, and we know that nobody's offended by the use of either one of the town names, but I think we're confused as to which is the primary name, and I think we're still confused. But I don't know if that was your what you thought, Ken, with Barrow, the name.
You're never quite sure with these name changes. Like, do people actually call it this, or will people be offended if I use the old name or whatever? I certainly am used to like being in places where people you're guiding can't pronounce any of the places where you are. I mean, Madagascar is one of the kings of that. Like one of the the like most common bird in Madagascar is FODY, with this little red member of the weaver family, and every single person who shows up in Madagascar, they see it in the hotel garden like the day before the tour, and then they tell me, "Oh, we saw the Fodi." So your first conversation is, "Well, it's actually called a foodie because the Malagasy O is an oo." So it kind of reminded me of Madagascar, the whole Yakvik situation.
Yeah. Foodie is sort of like like you go to the good restaurants.
Mm-hmm. Michelin stars,
little sesame oil, a little Chipotle.
Take the kid out of Pittsburgh. But.
Yeah, we should have his takes on tomato pie, but maybe that's a different conversation.
Don't think
Have you tried tomato pie, Ken?
Is that a Philadelphia thing?
It kind of is, actually. Yeah, I really stepped in it there in the Necco wafers. I went on a little rant about tomato pie, which is basically pizza without cheese. And people really love it in some places. And I ended up going to like several parties in a row where like people were raving about the tomato pie. And so I tried like a couple different kinds of tomato pie and filled up on it. And then I didn't have room for the pizza, which was far more tasty. And so I've been kind of on an anti-tomato pie rant since the beginning of this podcast. So about 4 years now, I guess.
4 years.
So, yeah.
I have not listened enough. I have to admit, like, I don't even listen to the episodes of our podcast that Charlie does without me because I've just been so busy between books and stuff. But this is like, I'm kind of saving your podcast for like when things become a little less busy and I'm on a long road trip. Like, then I will hear all the tomato pie rants.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
Yeah. It's probably not worth the wait. But
we were thinking of talking about podcasting in general, and the weird aspects of it and the interesting aspects. Like, I mean, there are people. Molly, haven't you gotten recognized just for your voice somewhere?
Yeah, that happens often now at birding events.
And you're like, oh, I know that voice. It's, yeah.
Wild. Yeah.
That is wild.
And the other part that I think we got kind of getting into this, and I saw it happen. I mean, I've seen it happen to you guys too, is you're basically talking about something and giving your opinion, your thoughts and whatever. You really don't have a real, you're sort of talking out loud about your experiences somewhere. And then you suddenly, insult everybody who loves, tomato pie in one way or the other. And I remember you talking about Argentina. That was one where I was like, you're almost apologetic at the end going, oh my gosh, like, and it's an odd thing where you actually don't mean badly. You're just kind of having a take and you realize you kind of talk about it. And then little by little, you're digging yourself further into this sort of hole of gosh, people are listening to this, I don't know what your thoughts are about that, but I've often listened to these again and I was like, why did I say that?
A lot of, how would I say this? When you travel somewhere, often the most interesting things you have to say are things that are sort of on the edge of, well, this might offend somebody. So I think if you excise everything that might possibly offend somebody, you're going to have a pretty boring podcast. So we do often come up to that line, and it's tricky. I mean, we haven't had anybody get real offended by anything we've said so far.
No.
But
well, I was listening today, and no, I'm just.
I just wanted to ask you a few tough, hard-hitting questions about your take on Argentina.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I've always told a lot of clients that some of the most interesting travel experiences I've ever had as an individual or with friends have been when things have gone horribly wrong. And what we do as a tour operator and tour guide is make things never go horribly wrong, if at all possible.
Mm-hmm.
So then we are actually, in a sense, you know that stuff is interesting and you grow as a person. Your life changes sometimes because it's something that happens on a trip that you're on that makes you sort of revamp how you think about place, time, people, whatever. But that's exactly what we try to shelter our clients from, because we want to see the birds and we don't want flat tires and we don't want all those things to happen. But it's a weird, dichotomy of how travel is in my mind.
I think about this a lot, and there's some kind of paradox there. And another interesting thing that can happen is that something does go profoundly wrong on a bird tour, which does happen despite our best efforts. And then how do people take it? People generally do pretty well. And I think even those, sometimes, as you say, those make for like the best memories, and groups can kind of bond sometimes too over like shared hardship or like getting through something difficult, which is exactly the thing that you're striving to avoid at all costs.
Right. Yeah. Like our folks on St. Paul stuck out there, they bonded.
I actually got a really nice note from a friend that was on a trip recently, and that was with us in St. Paul, and it said basically that very thing, like, been home for a month now, and what was difficult at the time has really kind of solidified in my brain as like just a really memorable, good experience. And yes, it was difficult. It was trying, but like, in a way, that was the experience we had. And, not, maybe you wouldn't say no regrets, but, it was really a positive thing. And I think that is true. That can be true for some of these challenging times on trips where things get tough.
Yeah. Well, another thing too is we're working with like local operators, local hotels, and individuals whose lives are depending on tourism, like from companies like ours. And even if it, as is often the case, is no individual's fault, you don't want to paint anybody else in a potentially bad light or make it sound like, it could have been done differently or something could have been changed. But like you said, the moments where everybody like looks around after something happens at each other and is like, oh my God, I can't believe that just happened. Or these crazy things where something goes wrong and you end up on another story. Like that's what will resurrect that group text a year later. And everyone will be like, remember this? I mean, it absolutely creates the most memorable moments.
Yeah.
It's a new niche we can carve out, like tours where we guarantee something will go wrong.
Yeah, something.
You'll bond with your fellow participants.
You won't know what or when something will go wrong. Yeah.
Exactly.
There have been companies in the past who have tried this, but they'll remain nameless. But the the other thing too, sometimes on your podcast you talk about airlines and air travel, and I wanted to say with our experience in Alaska, my experience with Alaska Airlines was absolutely amazing. Like I can't believe that I'm saying this, but they shifted it was 14 people multiple times to different flights with just a phone call and a little chatting about this or that. Essentially, every time the pricing was about the same. They made it so easy, and I was like thinking like, wow, like we often complain about airlines because a lot of them are really worth complaining about, but my experience with Alaska on this tour, with all of our issues, was that they were pretty amazingly good at when they were helping us out. So a little pro Alaska Airlines thing there. And
same for air travel in Madagascar, right, Ken?
Well, it's actually not as bad as you would think it is, and it's
I've heard
far better
stories.
than it used to be.
Okay,
they've kind of gotten their act together in the last few years, but it is the number one headache, sure, of running tours there. But yeah, I agree. I think Alaska is probably the best United States airline, which maybe doesn't say a lot because I find them pretty dreadful. But yeah, they seem decent. They seem to have a very different kind of company culture. Maybe some of it comes with the territory, right? When you're flying planes around up there, like just dealing with it's less predictable.
Yeah, it might be. I mean, I'm glad to hear they're also expanding to other places, and in the West for where I live, so we get we have a chance to fly them in different places. But still, they have a very small chunk of the world that is Alaska Airlines world. But yeah. I won't name other airlines in Alaska because that wouldn't be so positive.
Ken, one thing I was wondering about was, speaking of naturally adventurous, was kind of the origin story there. You want to kind of detail for folks how you guys, how that process began for you, and if there was like a sort of a seminal moment, or and how it unfolded to deciding you were actually going to begin podcasting.
Yeah, well, that was pretty much Charlie. It was his idea, and this really came out of the pandemic when we were sitting around with, not traveling, not guiding, trying to come up with things to do to just stay sane. And this was Charlie's idea, and we'd already done virtual tours. We did dozens of these like video virtual tours during the pandemic, and those had proved pretty popular. And we'd done this thing, School of Birding. We'd done these tutorials on, and well, actually, I can't remember. That might have come after the podcast, but it was in this time period when we're doing all this kind of social stuff.
Trying to find something to do.
Yeah. And then, we also realized that like potential audience was sitting around bored and looking for outlets, especially outlets that had something to do with travel. So I think it was a good time to do this stuff. And yeah, I'd never thought of doing a podcast. And, in some ways it's kind of uncomfortably public, as like Alvaro was saying, like you're putting your thoughts out there and you're often speaking quite spontaneously and you're putting yourself at some risk of saying something that makes you sound stupid or offends people. But yeah, I just said, sure, let's try. Got all this time and did it and really enjoyed it, obviously, and kept it going. Yeah, I'd actually be curious to ask you guys the same question. Maybe you've talked about it on earlier episodes of your podcast.
Jeez, I don't know if we have since like early on.
I don't know. The room that we record in, it looks like we're talking on Zoom right now, basically, for us. We've got our screens up and we're just talking. And it blows my mind again and again that people are listening to what we're saying on here.
Yeah. It is like for us, we sort of see like basements and, windows and stuff, and we're all kind of all over the, North America recording this. And it looks so, for me, familiar, yet, on the other hand, our info, our details just go out to like thousands of people, and yet it feels like we're just talking to each other, which I guess is part of the beauty of it. When you have like a conversation where it's as if you were just talking to each other, at a bar or something. It can be interesting if you're talking about birds and travel, and hopefully that works out in, even longer term for us, because you always seem like you were going to run out of stuff to say, but it never sort of happens.
It's a nice thing about birding and birders is it's very deep, wide, textured. There's a lot to dig into. One of the other questions I was curious about, and maybe if you'd rather not say all good, Ken, was I was chatting with on a tour recently with a listener who asked me something about how we record, and I was explaining, well, I was like, actually our episodes do not come out in the order that we record them. So like, sometimes, we have different kinds of episodes, and Molly will kind of release them at different times depending on, what she thinks makes sense or what we all, kind of talk through. And so, so we're recording this episode right now. I don't know. We'll figure it out. It might air next week or it might air a month from now, depending on kind of what else is going on. Do you guys kind of mix and match as well, or is it sort of you release as you record?
Yeah, we do the same thing. We mix and match, and some. I mean, in general, we release them in the order in which we record them, but sometimes if we have some reason, we'll mix them up. And we also have probably the same problem that you folks have, which is that you might cumulatively or together be traveling for like 2 months in a row, right? Where nobody is able to podcast. So you have to kind of bank these things. And yeah, it's just very different than, I listen to some podcasts where clearly the people have more of an office job. They're always at home and they just do it. It's like this week's podcast. It's really about right now. And then it's released. And we definitely, that would be nice to do, but there's no way we can do that. And I assume it's like that for you guys as well, that like you have to kind of bank them for travel periods.
Yeah, we definitely hit that point. We've hit a surprisingly sustainable model, I would say, of enough conversation and BS that we can keep it going as far as that goes. We don't run out of things to say. But yeah, we totally hit that point with Lifeless where we started this and we thought, okay, what do we do? How do we make this keep going in a way that we can actually manage? So you all have put out a lot of episodes. I think you've really lapped us because you go weekly, right?
We do weekly. I give Charlie credit for that. He's got this kind of Yorkshire doggedness where I've been sort of advocating for every other week for a long time, and he really doesn't want to do it. I don't know. So far, it's working. We'll see what happens.
Another odd thing about podcasts, from the listener's viewpoint, I think, is that I've had people say, I was listening to, your competitors, Naturally Adventurous, and I always think like competitors, like that never is in my mind with other podcasts. Sometimes we'd like listen to what other people are talking about to see, in a sense, like what are people out there kind of interested in. I would admit that we probably would be very uncomfortable doing like the top 5 birds or something like that, because it's almost like you guys have done that, and it's almost your thing. But
I would love it if you guys did that. That'd be cool.
I know, but it sort of seems like, but there is no competition in this whatsoever that I think people might not realize. In fact, what are we competing for? Your time, your ears. And then, I don't know, people have plenty of time in cars when they're probably listening to all of these podcasts and others, of course.
Well, and we deliver different kinds of things or produce different kinds of things and talk about different kinds of subjects. And there's probably broad overlap in interest, but then there's some people who will be interested in your podcast and not ours, and vice versa. And like a big diverse ecosystem out there of podcast listeners, and viewing it as some kind of zero-sum game is just very silly to me. It's just not at all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so no one has to be offended to tell us that they listen to other birding podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially tell us what you like, because that also, sometimes we have no idea what people enjoy and what they don't enjoy. And maybe you guys is the same thing. Like, you have no idea if other than just the hits, how many people listen to one episode versus the other. But even within an episode, do people love the how you pack for a trip versus the how you use your equipment part or what have you? You kind of almost don't know.
Yeah, you're right. And you're kind of blundering forward in a way as a podcaster, finding your way, finding what resonates.
That'd be a good title for a podcast.
Blundering Season 17, blundering our way forward. It is a weird process. Yeah, you start to get a sense of what people will like, but you're never totally sure. And you try something new, and some people like it, and some people hate it. And honestly, you don't get that much feedback. At least we don't. I mean, we get maybe a couple emails a week, which is decent, but that's still a pretty small compared to the number of people listening. That's a very small amount of feedback.
Yeah. And we've had completely opposite types of viewpoints on things. There's some people have said, could you let us know in the show notes when you stop talking about movies and food and other stuff, and tell us when you're going to start talking about birds, so I can just cut to the chase. Yet other people will be like, oh, I really love all that fun stuff you all talk about because it takes me away from what have you. And then we also get to talk about birds. And I was thinking like, wow, it really is one of those things where you hit different chords with different people, and fortunately they can fast forward through the stuff that they might not like, I hope, so that they just listen to the good stuff.
Right. There is a plus 30 seconds button, and it's a free thing. So you do want to listen to feedback, but at the same time, okay, if there's some aspect of you don't like, easily skip that or skip whole episodes that don't sound like they'll feel.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of different also experience levels people have, and sometimes a certain podcast might be talking exactly at their experience level in birding. Others are talking a little bit higher up, and that you kind of want to learn from that. And then on the other hand, some people are talking, sometimes like we do, just foolish stuff about, tomato pie that, many people could relate to, I guess, but some may not want to.
Or few.
We always find that when we talk about North America, those episodes do better. People seem to like those because maybe they're more relatable. Maybe people have been to Texas. Maybe people have been to Arizona, whatever. Actually, the places that Charlie and I find the most interesting, like the Solomons or whatever, Guam or Equatorial Guinea, maybe just don't. It's so far off the radar for some people that obviously some people like those episodes, but just as a whole, those are slightly less popular.
They're probably miscategorized in the ABA listing regions. Well.
That's the problem. That's podcasting regions.
I was enjoying the Stands episode, which I think is your most recent one. Would definitely encourage folks to listen to that. And if I can ask you kind of a double non-birding question here, as we're coming up on the hour, that was a big transition, right? Moving from Madagascar back to the U.S. and to the great state of Pennsylvania. What is the food item you miss most from Madagascar? And was there a dish that when you got back to the United States, you were like, oh, yes, I'm back in the land of this food? What would you say to those concepts?
Well, there's so many things that I miss that it's actually hard to choose a favorite one. And hopefully this isn't too general, but I really miss just the overall quality of food in Madagascar, particularly of produce and meat. It's just incredibly good. I was always running into like some Southern French hotel owner who would just rhapsodize about how good the produce was in Madagascar. It's sort of like maybe what they remembered from when they were a kid in Nice or something. Like, so these are like Mediterranean foodie people, and they recognize that it's awesome. So I just miss that in general, and it's pretty cheap as well. I mean, at least to my economics. Whereas coming to the States, both the quality and then the price are pretty shocking. Boy, something that I was so happy to get.
The fact that you struggle is probably not a good sign.
Right.
Yeah.
Crispy bacon is not something I eat a lot, but I do enjoy it sometimes. And that is something it's uniquely American. Even when I lived in South Africa, I was always on this quest for crispy bacon, which the quest failed. There, you get like what we might call Canadian bacon there. Mm-hmm. You do not get crispy bacon. It's a uniquely American thing, I would say. And who knows what they've done to that meat to make it taste like that. But
I don't know, but it's exquisite. It is truly exquisite. Yeah. I agree. Yeah. Nice. Well, we are at an hour here, and probably all of us need to scoot for one reason or another.
Actually, I can stay for another 2 hours if you want.
Okay. Well, you soldier on here.
A few more thoughts about listing regions.
Yeah.
That's right.
I'll do a monopod.
Monopod. I love that.
That's pretty good. Yeah. Ken, do you have anything coming up, or any other projects that you would tell folks to keep an eye out for in the future here?
Yeah, pretty much. Well, I'm headed to Namibia and Zambia is my next trip. We've already talked about Africa habitats, Madagascar birds, obviously naturally adventurous. Check us out if you like this podcast. You might like ours, you might not, but good chance you will. We briefly chatted about Brazil. I guess we're both headed to Brazil, and we may end up Brazil camp time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, man. That'd be awesome.
That would be cool.
Get a caipirinha or something,
Let's do it.
Yeah.
It's kind of a cool thing about being based in the States, and then like Western Hemisphere is just running into people more. I mean, Madagascar is just like the back of beyond globally, which there's some good things about that, but it is cool to just bump into folks and also just get to know more people as well. I met a lot of people in Alaska that maybe I knew their name from Facebook, but yeah, it's fun.
Excellent. Well, thanks for doing this, Ken. And thanks, everybody, for listening. Y'all have a great day.
Bye-bye.
See you, everyone.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it was great.